Your coffees. It's about 9:15. Top off that coffee and come on in. Plenty of room down front. Actually, Bill and Diane are sitting right in front, just like the pioneers that they are. We'll take a couple minutes here, and then I'll introduce the bishop, and we'll get going. Or if you get quiet. I got no jokes. Good morning. Oops. Is that on? Okay. Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started, if that's all right. Fill up your coffees and come on in. Today is Confirmation Sunday at Calvary, and in some ways it's the day that makes us Episcopalians, I think. At least if you came from a tradition that didn't have bishops. Episcopal means bishop. We got bishops. And it may be something, if you did, you take for granted, but I grew up in a tradition without bishops, and so this person, this symbol of the interconnectedness of Christians across time and across our city and across the country and across the world, this physical presence of someone who's saying, I'm gonna confirm you into this little corner of the Christian tradition, is a powerful symbol for me. It's a powerful reminder, especially in a world that's broken apart and disconnected in so many ways. So I'm always thrilled when this day comes and the bishop's here to remind us how interdependent we all are as Christians and just as humans in general. So welcome, Bishop Phoebe. That was more than one sentence, sorry.
It was a good run-on. It's interesting. There are lots of different types of bishops, and my canon to the ordinary is my number 2, and sometimes people say, what does that even mean? A canon to the ordinary. So there are diocesan bishops, there are bishops coadjutor, which means they're sort of going to become diocesan at some point. They're bishops suffragan, which means they are assisting. It's a presiding bishop, but a run-of-the-mill diocesan bishop is just an ordinary bishop. Thank you. So the Reverend Rob Courtney is the canon to the ordinary because I'm ordinary. I'm just an ordinary run-of-the-mill bishop. So that's how that came about. It's always a pleasure to be at Calvary, and even today listening to the announcements to hear about the amazing things that are happening through this place, and so appreciative of your mission and ministry, not only in our own diocese but beyond. So a couple of weeks ago, our denomination released the most recent findings from the annual parochial report. Is anybody familiar with the parochial report? Have you ever heard that? So if you're a church, if you're employed by the church, you know what it is. It's a report that each congregation in our denomination is asked to fill out every year with all kinds of numbers about services and baptisms and confirmations and weddings and funerals and money and outreach and mission. And you may think, Robin, that data never gets used, but it does. So there were some promising numbers and some challenging numbers from the most recent parochial report. And I thought I would share some of these trends because it'll give you a sense of not only what we are dealing with as bishops in our part of the Anglican Communion, but really what church leadership is dealing with throughout the world. So we now have 1.5 million Episcopalians. And so when I talk about we, I'm talking about the 110 dioceses that our new presiding bishop, Sean Rowe, sort of shepherds, largely in the United States, but also including Haiti and Cuba and Ecuador and Taiwan and the English-speaking congregations founded in Europe during the wars for American GIs who were there. So we are an international church. We're not a national church. So for our denomination, that's a $500,000 person decrease over the past decade. So we have gone from a high of about 3.5 million Episcopalians in the early 1960s to 1.5 million now. We've lost over half of our membership over the past 60 years. The income reported on all those parochial reports was $2.5 billion, with expenses of $2.4 billion. So it is good that our expenses are lower than our income, but the report was quick to note that the impact of inflation continues to erode our church-wide buying power. And of that $2.5 billion in income, $1.4 billion came from plate and pledge collections. So thanks to all of you in this season of stewardship who give generously to your church family. Our financial assets are actually increasing slightly, but of course you heard that our membership is decreasing. Before the most recent civil war in Haiti, which is such a sad situation, the Diocese of Haiti was the largest diocese of the 110 in our denomination. There were 100,000 Episcopalians in that diocese. That compares with the Diocese of Texas, number 2, with 72,000 Episcopalians, and the Diocese of Virginia, number 3, with 61,000 Episcopalians. And of course, if you want to put us in perspective, we've got about 6,500 Episcopalians in the 21 counties that comprised West Tennessee. So we don't have accurate numbers on the folk in Haiti given all of the turmoil, but they are the largest. Average Sunday attendance dropped significantly during the pandemic, but one of the good numbers is that those numbers are rising. So as we have come out of the worst of it and people are more comfortable being in buildings, average Sunday attendance is increasing. I hope that you all are seeing that here, and yet we still have fewer people in the pews on Sunday today than we did in 2019 before the pandemic. And this is very much in line with other denominations. The report also noted that we don't include virtual attendees in that number because we haven't quite figured out a standardized way to do it. Sometimes it's one person watching from one screen. Sometimes it's a family of 5 live streaming. So we don't really know what factor, even if we know how many hits we had live, as it were, we don't know how many people were watching on each screen. And then if you check the numbers several days later, there could have been lots of views from people who watched on another day. So I think we're still grappling with how to capture that. So the numbers are partial. They don't really fully reflect all the people who are connecting. 1/3 of all Episcopal churches have an average Sunday attendance of 25 or less. And the median average Sunday attendance is 38, which means that half of all of our congregations have less than 38 people in person worshiping on a Sunday morning, and have more. So clearly, as you think about everything that's going on at Calvary, you all are an outlier. So not surprisingly, because we have fewer members and fewer people on Sunday, there are fewer clergy. In 2010, 63% of all Episcopal churches had a full-time priest. Last year, in 2024, 44% did, or to state it another way, 56% of all Episcopal churches have a half-time priest or are relying on supply clergy. Once a month, twice a month, and doing morning prayer. So yet again, with 3 full-time clergy, you're very blessed here at Calvary. We're lucky to be in the South. There are 9 provinces in our denomination. We are in Province 4, I think the 21 southeastern United States dioceses, going from is Louisiana? Yeah, Louisiana to the East Coast and then south. Province 4 has 25% of the total membership of the Episcopal Church and 27% of all the average Sunday attenders. In part, I think, because of course in the South, there's still this cultural expectation that you be in a house of worship on Sunday. So if you talk to our colleagues on the West Coast or the East Coast, they're already seeing larger decline in terms of membership and attendance. So that's sort of starting on the edges and then moving into the center. And all these trends are reflected in our diocese. Fewer members, lower ASA over the past 10 years, with plate and pledge holding steady. We are very blessed to have an endowment, in fact, a growing endowment. And there are dioceses much larger than West Tennessee with no endowment at all. So the places with the people aren't always the places with the money. Again, think about Haiti with 100,000 Episcopalians and very few financial resources. These trends are also true when you consider the Anglican Communion as a whole. The Episcopal Church in the United States and Europe is declining in terms of membership, even as our financial assets grow. The Church Pension Group portfolio, which is our denominational pension fund, was managing $17.5 billion this year. Billion. With 1.5 million members. Meanwhile, there are an estimated 18 million Anglicans in Nigeria, 10 million Anglicans in Uganda. When you look at the Episcopal or Anglican Church in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia, what we sometimes refer to as the global South, they are growing numerically in leaps and bounds. So there's more to growing a congregation than money. We don't want to discount the importance of money, but clearly, if it was just about money, we'd have more people than anybody else, and we don't. So as we try to keep everybody at the table, there's often a disconnect between the parts of the world or the parts of our own denomination with financial resources and the parts where there are lots of people. And these realities are really what our church is facing at every level and what the Anglican Communion is facing at every level. Because in the final analysis, the church is not a financial institution, right? We don't exist to manage money. I think we exist to bring more people to the knowledge and love of Jesus Christ and to be engaged in mission and ministry, and that does require financial resources and human resources, and to serve not only our parishioners, but the most vulnerable members of the community. And so there's this tension, right? How much of what we have should we rightly preserve for future generations? We want to be good stewards. We don't want to spend it all. And yet, mission and ministry costs. So how much are we going to spend now? And I don't think there's one right answer to that question. So much of it is contextual. But I think this is a big part of the reason that Sean Rowe was elected as our new presiding bishop on the first ballot, because he has a strategic mind. He has been the parliamentarian for the House of Bishops for the past several years, which means he understands our denominational constitution and canons better than many canon lawyers. Like, he understands how we are structured. And so I think the bishops have shown confidence in him to help us try to sort all of this out. I would say, in my own humble opinion, the current model is not sustainable over the next 50 years. And I think we are going to have some changes. There have been conversations about maintaining 110 dioceses. While we have fewer members and fewer clergy and fewer people worshiping on Sundays, we haven't seen a large decrease in terms of the number of dioceses. So recently, the Diocese of Texas now has the Fort Worth within their fold, and the several dioceses in the state of, in the Milwaukee area have now combined. The diocese that used to be Eastern Michigan and Western Michigan have reunited to be the Diocese of the Great Lakes. The Diocese of Central Pennsylvania and the Diocese of Bethlehem have announced that they are recombining. The Diocese of Indiana and the Diocese of Indianapolis are in conversation about whether to make the whole state of Indiana one large diocese again. Our hope in the 70s and 80s that by creating all these separate dioceses, each of them would grow, has not proven to come to fruition. And so we're thinking about partnerships in some new ways to sort of make it sustainable. And some of you in this room, I dare say, were members of this diocese in the late 1970s when those conversations occurred under Bishop Sanders. And West Tennessee was split off in 82, and East Tennessee was split off in 85, and now we have three of everything. We have three canons to the ordinary. We have three canons for finance and administration. We have three daughters of the king. We have three unions of black Episcopalians. We have three of everything. Three disciplinary boards, three of all of it. So are there some ways, short even of merger, that we can actually do some things together to make this structure be less of an impediment to doing mission and ministry? So of course, it's really important that you all continue to pray for all bishops. We are very grateful and appreciate those prayers that you make on our behalf every Sunday. Prayers make a big difference. We feel them, We need them. We are supported and encouraged by them. This is uncharted territory, both for our presiding bishop and, of course, our Church of England is in the midst of its own very significant time of transition, with the Archbishop of Canterbury stepping down on Epiphany, January 6th, and no clear plan about when the new Archbishop will be appointed by King Charles, or what this will mean long-term for the unity of the worldwide Anglican communion, which is 80 million Episcopalians and Anglicans in 165 countries. Because everywhere Great Britain went when it was in its colonial phase, they took two things: the form of government and the church. So every part of the world that's a former British colony, including the United States, has a branch of the Anglican communion here. So I think with that, I'd actually like to stop and see if there are any thoughts or initial reactions or comments or questions. And I did get a question earlier today. Does anyone have an initial thing? And raise your hand, and as Catherine is going to you, I will just sort of say that in keeping with our sort of focus on our smaller churches over the past several years, there will be a conference just for the representatives of our 18 small churches in April, hosted by St. Luke's in Jackson, so that we can sit down together with all of our small churches to figure out what is our plan moving forwards for how we can continue to support one another.
And I don't have a question,
Yes.
but a comment or an observation.
Yeah.
I was a child when the diocese split into three in Tennessee, but it occurs to me too that the other thing that in the 70s and 80s, when all of these places were dividing, was like right on the cusp of changing how we communicate and
Technology.
travel and technology. So
Absolutely.
that we were actually just about to be able to do things more remotely or more easily from distance.
You're right.
Right at the point where we split.
You're right.
There is this ease of I can Zoom with you and I can be in the room, right? You know. So
Right.
it's just interesting that was kind of, we were almost there
I know.
technologically.
I know.
But the geography won.
It did.
at that point. Yeah,
Right, because at that time you were driving 3 hours from Memphis and 4 hours from Knoxville into Nashville for a standing committee meeting or a diocesan council meeting, because we didn't have Skype or Zoom.
Right, you get all the way to Johnson City from here.
That's right.
It's a long way.
Yeah.
Questions or comments?
So it's interesting, you may think that bishops think about, I don't know, sacred things, holy things, rosary, Anglican rosary, prayers, chanting, and this sort of stuff, right? This is the call. This is the kind of stuff that bishops are charged with doing. So in some ways, it's not your grandfather's episcopate. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make a comment, and I'm sure you can elaborate on it, but my daughter, Susie Hebert, is an Episcopal priest and is in Texas, and she has had her ministry there, first in Austin, and then a number of years ago she moved to serve a church near Houston, and so she has been in the Diocese of Texas. And I can remember when I learned that was the largest American diocese. And I have observed her and her ministry and seen, as she worked at several different churches. And I've always been impressed with the way that their clergy are supported and the communication they have. And everybody seems to know that special bishop himself, who is head of the diocese, and he visits churches recently. You think about a diocese, it includes Houston and the Austin area and Fort Worth, Dallas, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so large.
Yeah.
But I just was impressed, for example, with support groups that they had for clergy, where they would come together, and the fact that there was a suffragan bishop that was just for their region and really communicated. So I'm just commenting.
So, yeah, that diocese is extremely blessed. In addition to Bishop Andy, they have Bishop Hector, they have Bishop Kay, so they have 4 full-time bishops. They have in their own endowment oil revenue, and then maybe 10 years ago, maybe Scott and Catherine can remember when they sold the hospital system that their diocese owned, they received $1 billion from the sale of that hospital. So Bishop Doyle is very blessed. Bishop Doyle probably has a larger portfolio than our presiding bishop. But yes, that's an example of human resources and financial resources that can be very supportive, yes.
So, lest our confirmands think they just booked a seat on the Titanic.
Nope, you didn't.
I'd love for you to speak to that landscape, which you've described. Truthfully, is like it's not an era when people are just falling into church pews.
Right.
And yet, it seems like there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes.
Right? So how would you see our diocese responding to the landscape you've described, maybe locally, globally, nationally? What's our call?
So one of the things that we have learned is that while people are less likely to get up and be at church even at 10:30, certainly at 8, if they are aware of outreach initiatives, they show up for that. So people will show up to help with the feeding ministry. People will show up if a congregation is going to build a Habitat for Humanity house when they're not here on Sunday mornings. So we know that there is a gap not only in capturing those who were online, but those who were actively engaged in the life of congregations 7 days a week. So for me, I get to see evidence of all of that stuff throughout the diocese, which gives me a lot of hope. But how do we measure it, right? And as we think about the earliest years of Christianity, when it was illegal to be a Christian, it was a crime in the Roman Empire if you gave allegiance to anything other than Caesar. When we were much more mobile, we did a whole lot of things like caring for the sick and educating people and housing people and forming small business collaboratives together. And it was all of that stuff that led people to want to join the church. So the more opportunities we have for that sort of ministry and mission, the stronger I think we're going to be. And for those of you who weren't at Diocesan Convention, we're about this week to send out an email from the videos that we had at Diocesan Convention highlighting what some of our smallest churches are doing in terms of outreach and ministry. And I was really inspired by seeing what they were doing. We gave grants of $500 to $5,000. Not a ton of money. We set aside $50,000 in our diocesan budget for that purpose. And they have done some amazing things. So that's where I see the hope, Scott, is actually as important as our job is on Sundays, what's happening Monday through Saturday that will ultimately give us the encouragement to keep on going. Oh, we have someone up front.
I just want to say, I know we're so fortunate to have our 3 wonderful clergy. I mean, absolutely, they're the best. But because we have 3, I don't want you, we're working them to death. I just want you to know that.
No.
Here's Bella.
So it's interesting, as I travel throughout the diocese, often a small church will say, well, just send us somebody from Holy Communion. Just send us somebody from St. John's or Calvary. And I have to explain to them, they are working full time. And I can say that having been one of 3 full-time and 3 part-time clergy at Trinity Episcopal Church in New Orleans. And on the school side, the head and the chaplain were also clergy. So we had 8 priests on that campus and 2 deacons. And believe me, I was working hard. So explaining to them about not only the larger community, so the larger pastoral care needs, but also the extensive programming for children, for youth, for young adults, for adults, like all the things that happen. Sometimes if you're in a small church that's only open on Sunday morning, you don't really have a sense of the scope. But that is something that I do get asked, Nancy, on a regular basis. Just send us somebody from Memphis.
I was so surprised to hear about the number of Episcopalians in Haiti. So what's going on there with them? Are they able to worship? Is there contact with them? Are they?
So in addition, Haiti is quite complicated. In addition to, and so what, to the best of my knowledge, not being fully apprised, in addition to all of the secular issues, basically they don't have a functioning government, there have also been some significant challenges among the church leadership, with some members of the standing committee being accused of crimes, right? So that diocese has not been functioning well for a while. And with all the crime and violence, it's very dangerous for anybody to be out and about on the streets. So my understanding is no, they don't have anything like a semblance of regular worship at this time because of the danger. And for lots of reasons, we're praying that they do get a stable government. I'm not sure. It would be someone in the presiding bishop's office who might have the most up-to-date information about what's happening on the ground. But I think right now people are just being encouraged to stay home and stay safe and pray from the privacy of their homes. Yeah.
Others?
Oh, you're getting your steps in, Catherine.
Comfy shoes.
Hi. So as far as big themes that I've heard you touch on in the last little while, I've heard change, sustainability, and hope. I want to ask you about joy. And obviously Michael Curry was a figure who was known as a joyful person. Where are some other places, whether in the Episcopal Church writ large or here in our diocese, that you are witnessing, feeling joy?
That's a great question. Yes, we're so blessed to have Michael Curry for 9 years. And my hope is that he's not just going to go to North Carolina and sit in his house, right? That he will, to the extent that he chooses, still be engaged at the denominational level and the worldwide level. Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe has a different demeanor. He is more introverted. I would say that he does have joy, and it's shown in a different fashion. I see a lot of joy at the schools that are affiliated with the Episcopal Church. We've got 3 schools that are members of the National Association of Episcopal Churches, even though one of them is an independent school. But if you have any sort of connection or Episcopal ethos, and so every year I go and lead chapel services at St. Mary's School, at Grace St. Luke's School, and I try to get to all 3 campuses of St. George's School, the Memphis campus, the Collierville campus, and the Germantown campus. Man, being in chapel with those young folk, that gives me a lot of joy. And they have great questions. They are on fire for the Lord. The 4 young persons who have been part of the Diocesan Youth Council for the past year that I have met with quarterly are amazing. They planned 4 events for the fall. Our first event in September, we had 40 participants. Our second event in October, we had 70 participants. And they've got a Christmas event planned next month in December. So that group is continuing to grow. So seeing the connections of our young folks from multiple congregations and multiple school systems, public and private, kind of building relationships through those events and through happening. So yeah, I would say it's probably, I mean, there's no knock on those of us who are older, and I'm in that category too, but it's really the youth and my time with them that gives me a sense of joy and hope for the future, because at least for those young folks, they are really interested in faith and church and a relationship with God. And I am not discouraged, notwithstanding some of the numbers. I'm not. I just think we're in an era of transition. And I think it might look different on the other side. And as someone who is a lifelong Episcopalian, who loves the reverence of our liturgy, who loves the hymns, who was around for the former hymnal, before the 82 hymnal, the former prayer book. I was confirmed under the 1928 prayer book. That was the prayer book of my confirmation. Like, I love all of that. And increasingly, people want something in addition to that. Right? And so the extent to which we might be open to different forms of liturgy or music, and maybe that isn't the primary service on Sunday. Maybe it's an evening service. Maybe it's a weeknight service. Meeting people where they are. That's another aspect of the early church that we have moved away from a little bit. Whenever people identify us by our beautiful red doors and they come to one of our church buildings, they're welcomed, they are supported. But if you've been wounded by any denomination and you're reticent to come in, how might we go to you? And again, Jesus wasn't tied to any building, right? I mean, there's very little of the gospel stories about Jesus in a church building, either in a synagogue or the temple in Jerusalem. Think about the stories. He's walking around, he's on a boat, he's in a field, he's in a private residence. I mean, that's where he's having the largest number of touches. So what might it look like for us to think about how can we increase our touches outside of the beautiful spaces that we are blessed to have? That E word, evangelism, and it does make us uncomfortable. You know, the many years that I lived in New Orleans, and you go down to Bourbon Street, and so often there's a person on the corner with a big bullhorn yelling out that it's Sodom and Gomorrah and you're all going to go to hell for being on Bourbon and drinking, right? So that's what we think about, and it makes us uncomfortable, and yet our form of evangelism doesn't have to look like that. It can look like just asking someone, how are you doing? And actually having the time to listen to someone else's story and being willing to share a little of our own story and building the relationships one-on-one. So my sense is that it'll be some of the earliest practices of the church. That's what's going to help renew us. And we just have got to get a little comfortable going outside of our comfort zones. And so I have to go around and meet new people and talk about faith all the time. So I'm sort of over the part when I was uncomfortable. But I think more of our laity are going to have to get a little more comfortable sharing about what your relationship with Jesus means in your life. Yes, we've got one here. Yes.
I'm so glad you said evangelical. Is there a committee that is thinking about that in this diocese? That Because I will sign up.
That's a great question.
No. I'd be good at it, but I don't want to be a chair of anything. But I'm very interested. I mean, I have children who were raised in this church, and one has decided to go to an evangelical church. I'm like, well, we've got that. We just hide our light sometimes.
Yeah,
So
that's a great suggestion. No, we don't have a diocesan evangelism committee. I think it's a great idea. I'll definitely take it back to the diocesan leadership team. I did have in my own mind a sense of, all right, in 2018, when I won the election, what might the first year, the first 3 years, the first 5 years, 10 years, I had a sense, although I knew I had to come and learn and listen, and really what blew it all up was COVID. So everything that I thought, it's just been a whole different reality. And so now that we are on the other side, that the numbers are starting to come back up, I think we have the bandwidth to do some of that. So that's actually a great suggestion. I'll take that back. Oh, we've got one in this corner.
Do you know how other primary denominations are growing and/or declining in comparison to the numbers you've shared for the Episcopal Church?
So we often hear, and I am in relationship with Lutheran bishops and clergy and United Methodist bishops and clergy, and our prayers are certainly with them because the United Methodist Church is going through today what we went through 20 years ago. But you hear from all of the mainline denominations that their membership numbers are down. And actually, if you look at national data of people who report being Christian and worshiping in Christian communities, those numbers are down. Even though if you drive by a large church of a different denomination, you see all the cars, you may think, well, wow, are they growing? The research shows that for many of the mega churches, while they have a high membership, there's also a high turnover. That people come in, but they don't necessarily stay for multiple generations. So the reality is, even beyond churches, or let me say religious institutions, so churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, Americans are less likely to join any organization now. It's an interesting social dynamic. So Rotary clubs and Kiwanis and all of these sorts of civic institutions that had much higher membership in earlier generations are all down. So something is going on beyond just the religious community about Americans unofficially joining things. My sense is that our gift as a denomination is that we embrace the mystery of God. We embrace the questions and the journey. And when your life seems to be in upheaval, either because of personal challenges or fear about what's happening in the country, some people want certainty. They want to be told, if you do these 10 things, you're in. And I get it, right? And so denominations that are willing to do that, sometimes that attracts people. What I think our gift is to say, I don't know the answers to many things. I'm not going to pretend to know the answers. What I'll do is I'll walk with you and I'll journey with you. We're going to figure it out together. But I'm not going to say, do these 10 things. I don't know who's going to hell. That's so far above my pay grade. That's up to God, right? That isn't me. That's God, right? And yet for some people, they want that certainty. They want someone to say, you are absolutely in, you are absolutely going. And for us, how can we do a better job of sharing the beauty of journeying together without having all of the answers? So we're just in this interesting era where I think there's a lot of fear and people are looking for answers, and our answer is just different. So I feel like the people who are here are fed by that answer, and let's see how we can continue to expand.
Thank you, Bishop Phoebe. Yeah, and sometimes we think we want answers. What we really need is friendship,
Yes.
connection, relationship. So it'll be interesting how we respond in the days to come. Thank you. Confirmands, if y'all will scoot over, Yvette's going to